To tonight's show. This year's COP has been the story of young people, inspired by Greta, of course, but it's not just Greta, it's young people all over the world who know it's their future that's at stake. And they really get it, they really mean it. So in response, we've been building a platform to hold and present their voices. It's called My Bit, Your Bit. And young people have been telling us via their phones, through Twitter and Instagram, how they've been responding to the climate emergency, what they've been doing as their bit, their best, and what their demand is of the world leaders who need to do their bit, the genuine systemic changes that the world needs.
I changed my diet to plant-based because of the greenhouse gas emissions in animal agriculture. So I challenge you, the world leaders at COP, to decarbonise the animal agriculture industry.
I try and do my bit every day to be a voice for our incredible ocean, to make sure that it's recovered and that it's being protected. Now, world leaders at COP26, I need you to do your bit and bring forward legislation and real commitment to helping to recover our ocean and to ensure that it's protected for the future.
Working together, every reduction of our carbon footprint will help towards the climate crisis. For me, I've supported moving away from the fast fashion industry, using recycled, reused or vintage clothes. And I challenge you, leaders at the COP summit, to make meaningful and radical system change, cutting the funding on fossil fuels and promoting progressive changes to the transport sector.
For my bit, I'm giving up a significant amount of my time for environmental activism, campaigning against ecocide and the destruction of nature.
We are not fighting for our future, we are fighting for everyone's future, and we will not stop until we are done.
So I'm challenging you, world leaders at COP. Stop the destruction of nature by protecting existing forests and by making ecocide a crime. We are doing our bit. We need you to do your bit.
And as for your bit, we want politicians and leaders to start thinking ambitiously and acting tangibly to solve this climate crisis.
We need politicians to remove fossil fuel subsidies and subsidise sustainable energy.
We all need to do our bit to save the planet. What will you do?
So tweet your message too. Just use the hashtag MyBitYourBit. And here's one young person at the COP who spoke to us in more detail about what she's doing and what she wants world leaders at the COP to do. Meera Dasgupta is an eco-poet. In fact, she was the Youth Poet Laureate in the US in 2020. So what brings her to COP26?
I'm at COP because I feel as if we need more young people within places of leadership, and we need to understand that our voices matter in terms of negotiations and that the true work is happening in Glasgow at large. I was in the protests and strikes on Friday and Saturday. I was with that group of people trying to push forth these people in positions of leadership in order to do their jobs, in order to find a future for us all, because I think the next generations, we're the inheritors of this world. And we all borrow this land that we're on, a lot of which is stolen land. And I think that we need to acknowledge that and bring more youth from the global south, indigenous leaders, leaders and women of color within these spaces, because climate change affects us all. And I hope that by being at COP, but more so being in Glasgow, I can meet a lot of those international voices, which are integral to causing tangible actions within our own communities.
And do you feel, having been at COP now for some days, that what you've heard so far is giving you any hope?
I feel like 2030 and pushing the goals further and further, whether it's 2030, 2050, it's not enough, because I feel like having a future facing goal, it is important, but the time is now to cause change. on a larger level, and to not be so reliant on pollutants. And because I feel like personally, what has given me hope are, again, young voices and those voices of change. Because from our leaders, we are the ones who are their constituents, and they have to remember that they're representatives of the people. And I feel like now there has been a shift where the youth, the people who are on the streets of Glasgow asking for climate action, they are our representatives, and we have become our own representatives and voices. I feel like personally, what's important to me in terms of understanding is that in order to cause climate action in terms of feelings, there is a lot of grief, there is a lot of frustration, but there's also a lot of hope. So we can't stop feeling, and feeling is the essence of it all, and conversations and understanding. Because as we continue to feel, as we continue to move forwards and not think about in terms of all of this and get lost in terms of climate grief, I think that it's important to understand that we have each other and that there's still communities backing us with the support.
Are you saying that solidarity with others is the way to cope with that grief and move with it rather than be drowned by it?
Yes, and I feel like climate justice is interwoven with all of these other kinds of justice, whether that's social justice, racial justice, gender justice, because climate change is a societal issue. And once you begin to acknowledge your own privilege and acknowledge these social constructs which make up a lot of our infrastructures, there has to be a deconstruction. And that's what I feel like our leaders are afraid of, that deconstruction and relearning and acknowledgement of the pain that has happened because of us, because of people in countries that are wealthier from the global north. Climate change is our fault. And I think that there has to be more openness in terms of perspectives and in terms of understanding the communities that are most affected, because the lives of these individuals who have gone through wildfires in California and the Mediterranean, who've seen the coastal flooding, their experiences are just as important and necessary when creating legislation for the country, but also as global citizens for the world. Personally, I am a poet from New York City. I like writing eco-poetry, which is poetry on climate change, poetry on the lineages which enact climate change, because I feel like we're all a part of different intergenerational conversations and intergenerational histories. And I feel like what poetry has given me and what writing and art has given me is also a community and a way to express these feelings, because when you're younger, you understand that climate change is bad. You know what feels good and what doesn't feel so right in terms of morals and understanding. But poetry and writing and art for me has been a way to express those feelings and find examples. So I feel like once we begin to understand each other, once we begin to understand, again, these experiences and understand these examples as not only statistics, but as human lives who are being impacted every day, I think that once we garner that connection, we can continue to acknowledge the fact that we can't be complicit. We can't stand within our own privilege, because even though it might be painful to understand that we're at fault and to acknowledge that, because acknowledgement doesn't always mean success. Sometimes you might go forth into this new realm of understanding and you might fall, you might feel angry, you might feel frustrated and sad, but at the same time, there's so much room for growth in that pain. And I think that growth is something to always, or something that is honorable in terms of striving for, and need to grow not only as individual people, but as a human race as well.
So I wondered if you had to pick just one thing. I mean, you're obviously a very interconnected minded person, but if you could nonetheless pick one thing that you could say, well, I do this as my bit, and one thing that you would ask the world leaders to do as a kind of systemic change, what would your bit and their bit be, my bit and your bit be?
Yeah, so I feel like my bit would be utilizing my networks as an artist and utilizing poetry in order to uplift and empower my communities, because I feel like art can move people in a way that facts can't always do. And I feel like that's the emotions and those lived experiences, again, which can cause tangible changes in terms of shifting perspectives in a way to encompass more people and more lives in terms of many issues, not just climate change. And in terms of what I would tell our leaders to do is that, first of all, representation matters. You have to bring more people to the table. And I've said this multiple times, but it's not, you can't just bring people to the table and then show them the door. They have to make a tangible part in terms of these negotiations, in terms of actions, because you, again, represent us. And I'm telling this to our leaders in terms of government positions and also corporate actors, because in 10 years, when the world is burning, what is money going to do? What is money but paper, which comes from the very trees which are currently burning in California, in the Mediterranean? So bring these voices to your table and show them and show the communities which you have been elected in order to be at the table for, that they also deserve a place there, that they have the ability to represent themselves. And I think that's important because I know that our leaders also have families. And think about in 2030, what your children, what your loved one, what world do you want them to see?
More power to you, Elba. Thank you so much. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye. We're only 2 days away now from the end of the COP, and the draft of the official text has been leaked. And there's a sense of shock around because our hopes of reaching 1.5 degrees or even anywhere under 2 degrees have been dashed. So here's the blisteringly sweary juice media again to remind us what the COP actually needs to do if they really mean it.
Hello, I'm from the government with an update on how we're handling the climate crisis. We know you're all counting on us to solve this problem so humanity can keep enjoying its favorite pastime, continuing to live on this planet. But you see, we've realized that we are the problem. And so, how shall we put this? We're actually going to get us all killed. Look at this graph shaped like a penis because it shows how fucked we are. This is where we are now. And as we can see, it's already pretty fucked with massive fires, floods, heat waves, locusts, bullshit. This is what scientists call the stop here or we're fucked point. And this is where we're currently headed, or as scientists call it, net fucked by 2050. The good news is we've promised to reduce our emissions. And if you take all our promises and add them together, that puts us on track for still very much fucked by 2050. And that's if we keep our promises. A big if, since some of our biggest promises are being coke-blocked by corporate coal shills, while others are nothing more than blah blah blah, or a plan printed on a pamphlet. Pamphlet? Our promises and pamphlets are also based on the hope that we'll offset our emissions with technologies which don't work or even fucking exist. Or with technologies that do work and exist, like trees. Except trees need time to grow, which we don't have. And space, which we also don't have. Plus, trees can burn, which seems to happen a lot these days due to climate change. And when they do, they release all that carbon they captured. Which means the only way we can keep our promises is to stop emitting carbon. Are we doing that? God, no. We've been subsidizing it at a rate of $11 million per minute, which discourages investment in renewables by distorting the market. And that's why there's a huge gap between our promises and where we need to be. We don't talk about that gap because that would entail a complex process called being honest. Being honest would mean admitting that we're failing. And we can't do that because then we'd have to stop failing. That would mean ending fossil fuel subsidies and banning all new gas, coal and oil projects. And to anyone suggesting harming our precious children like that, we say, how dare you? So being honest isn't an option for us, which is why we've come up with the next best alternative. Net zero by 2050. Net zero by 2050 means that instead of being honest this decade by taking this path, we leave the being honest part to the last minute by taking that path instead. As you can see, both lead to net zero in 2050, but they're very different journeys, because this path adds this many emissions to the atmosphere, and that one adds 3 times as much. And since emissions are what's causing the planet to warm, that means crossing the stop here or we're fucked point, which risks setting off irreversible chain reactions beyond our control. That's the exciting part of running an experiment with the only planet we know that supports life in the whole fucking universe, just so we can make a few billionaires even richer. Net zero by 2050. Anywho, feel free to take over favour from us at any time. Because as you can see, we're captured by the fossil fuel industry, compromised by our moral failings and lack of vision, and probably going to get us all killed. This has been a message from your local government franchise. Goodbye.
Authorised by the Department for blah blah blah.
So that's it for tonight's show. I'll leave you with the late, great Roy Bailey reminding us that the struggle's not over yet.
What will they say of us 100 years from now, when they look back on these unhappy days? They'll shake their heads at how so many swallowed lies, that dog-eat-dog so long went undefeated. Or will they curse us then, that so much death crept in, there was so little left to build again? Or will their smile salute, and like a song recall the ones who through it all went undefeated? There are two traditions in all human societies: the tradition of hierarchy, of order, and of discipline, and the tradition of equality, freedom, justice. I'm tired of wearing thin these same old words of rage. Some days the bad guys win, but nothing's changed. Although the language pales and the nerves of love grow numb, somehow we carry on undefeated, holding all people's lives to be of equal worth, more dear than the money talk or the tricks of the state. The hands that work no wrong, the breath that lifts the song, the hearts that hold each other undefeated. I want you to sing that. You didn't come here expecting to sing. Well, you've got to accommodate this misfit down the front here. All I want you to sing is the hands that work no wrong, the breath that lifts the song, the hearts that hold each other undefeated. Can you try that? The hands that work no wrong, the breath that lifts the song, the hearts that hold each other undefeated. I can't hear you. The hands that work no wrong, good. The breath that lifts the song, the hearts that hold each other undefeated. Come on, you can all do it. The hands that work no wrong, the breath that lifts the song, the hearts that hold each other undefeated. One more. The hands that work